The blood dripped from Hannah Turner's split lip as she crawled across the wooden floor of their homestead, her trembling fingers reaching for the overturned chair to pull herself up. It was 1874 in the unforgiving territory of Wyoming, and the evening's beating had been worse than most, all because the doctor in Wheatland had confirmed what she'd feared for 3 years of marriage. She might never bear a child. Useless woman. Vernon Turner spat, fastening his belt with shaking hands, his face flushed with whiskey and rage. What good's a wife who can't give a man sons? My ma had 8 children. 8. And you can't even manage one. Hannah's vision blurred as she tasted iron on her tongue. She was 22 and had already lost any hope that marriage would bring her the joy her parents had promised. Vernon had courted her with gentle smiles and promises of a beautiful life on their homestead outside Wheatland. The first slap had come 6 months after their wedding, when her monthly blood arrived yet again. "I'm trying, Vernon," she whispered, wincing as she touched her swollen cheek. "The doctor said." "I don't care what that quack said. My brother's wives are all breeding fine. It's you that's broken." He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. "I'm going to town. Don't expect me back tonight." The door slammed behind him, and Hannah listened to the hoofbeats of his horse fade into the distance. The silence that followed was both a relief and a prison. She knew what would happen next. Vernon would drink himself senseless at Barker's saloon, lose money at cards, and return tomorrow with an even fouler temper. Slowly, painfully, she made her way to the wash basin and dabbed at her injuries with a damp cloth. The mirror above showed a woman she barely recognized, hollow-eyed with a purpling bruise forming along her jaw. 3 years ago, she'd been the prettiest girl in her small Ohio town, with dreams as bright as her chestnut hair. Now she felt ancient, brittle, and utterly alone. Hannah knew she needed to leave. Vernon's violence had escalated with each passing season, and tonight's rage after the doctor's verdict had shown her a truth she could no longer ignore. He might eventually kill her. But where could she go? They were 15 miles from town. She had no money of her own, and her family was 1,000 miles east. With trembling hands, she packed a small cloth sack. Her mother's silver hairbrush, a faded daguerreotype of her parents, a change of clothes, and the secret stash of coins she'd been saving from selling eggs to passing travelers. It wasn't much, barely enough for a stagecoach ticket to the next town, let alone a new life. Before sunrise, Hannah was on the rough trail to Wheatland, walking beside the small stream that led toward town. Each step sent pain through her bruised ribs, but the growing distance between herself and the homestead lightened something in her chest. By mid-morning, the Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly, and her lips were cracked with thirst. She knelt by the stream to drink and splash cool water on her swollen face. "Madam, you all right there?" The deep voice startled Hannah so badly she lost her balance, tumbling backward onto the rocky bank. A tall man on horseback had approached without her noticing, the sound of hooves muffled by the rushing water. She scrambled to her feet, instinctively backing away. "I don't mean to frighten you," the stranger said, his voice gentling as he noted her fear. "Samuel Archer. I run the Circle, a ranch north of here." Hannah couldn't respond. All she could think was that Vernon had friends everywhere in the county. If this man recognized her. Samuel Archer dismounted with fluid grace that belied his tall frame. He kept his distance, seeming to understand her wariness. She took in his appearance. He wasn't one of Vernon's drinking companions. His clothes were well worn but clean, his dark beard neatly trimmed, and his eyes, they were kind in a way that made her chest ache. "You're hurt," he observed quietly, "and headed to town on foot." "That's a fair piece to walk in this heat." Hannah touched her bruised cheek self-consciously. "I'll manage." "I've no doubt," he replied, surprising her, "but if you've no objection, I could offer you a ride. My business in town can wait if you need a doctor." "No." The word burst from her with unexpected force. "No doctors, please." Understanding darkened his eyes, and Hannah realized he'd likely guessed the source of her injuries. Shame flooded her, and she looked away. "Then perhaps just a ride to town," he offered, his tone carefully neutral. "It's another 8 miles, and the sun's only getting hotter." Hannah hesitated. The stranger seemed decent enough, but 3 years with Vernon had taught her that men's kindness often came with a price. Still, her body ached, and the thought of walking another 8 miles made her dizzy with fatigue. "I can pay," she said, clutching her small sack closer. Something flickered across his features, surprise, perhaps, or sadness. "That won't be necessary, madam. Just common courtesy out here." He led his horse closer, a sturdy chestnut gelding with intelligent eyes. "This is Copper. He's steady as they come." Samuel Archer helped her mount, his hands respectful and impersonal on her waist. Once she was settled, he swung up behind her, maintaining a careful distance between their bodies. "Where in town are you headed?" he asked as they set off at an easy pace. Hannah hadn't thought that far ahead. She had no destination beyond a way. "The stage coach office," she decided. "When does the next coach leave?" "Eastbound stage leaves tomorrow morning. Westbound not until Friday." He paused. "If you don't mind my asking, do you have people waiting somewhere?" "No," she admitted, then immediately regretted the confession. It revealed too much of her vulnerability. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic motion of the horse lulling Hannah despite her pain and fear. Samuel Archer didn't press for conversation, and she was grateful for it. The landscape rolled by sagebrush and prairie grass stretching to distant mountains, so different from the green Ohio hills of her childhood. "My sister runs a boarding house in town," Samuel finally said. "Clean, respectable place. She doesn't ask questions of folks who need a quiet place to stay." Hannah stiffened. "I told you I can pay my way." "I'm sure you can," he replied evenly. "Just thought you might want to know of a safe place is all. Some of the other establishments in Wheatland aren't as particular about their clientele." His consideration brought unexpected tears to Hannah's eyes, which she blinked away furiously. Crying wouldn't help her situation. Nothing would, except putting as many miles as possible between herself and Vernon Turner. As they crested a rise, the town of Wheatland appeared in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings along a main street, with scattered homesteads surrounding it. It wasn't large, but to Hannah it represented possibility, however fleeting. "If it's not overstepping," Samuel said carefully, "might I know your name, in case someone comes asking after you?" Hannah tensed. "Why would you think someone would come looking?" He was quiet for a moment. "Marks like those on your face don't come from falling down stairs, madam. And folks who run usually have someone they're running from." His directness was startling after years of Vernon's friends and neighbors pretending not to notice her bruises, her flinching, her increasing isolation. The community's silence had been its own kind of violence. "Hannah," she finally said. "Hannah Turner." "Mrs. Turner," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "If anyone comes asking for you, I didn't see you on the road today." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Mr. Archer." They reached town shortly before noon, the streets busy with wagons and townspeople going about their business. Hannah was acutely aware of her battered appearance and kept her head down as Samuel helped her dismount in front of a 2-story clapboard building with a neat sign reading Archer Boarding House. "My sister, Helen, will get you settled," Samuel said. "I have some business at the Mercantile, but I'll return to check on you if that's acceptable." Hannah wasn't sure why he was being so kind, but she was too exhausted to question it further. "Yes, thank you." Helen Archer proved to be a brisk, practical woman in her 30s with the same kind eyes as her brother. She took one look at Hannah's face, ushered her inside without comment, and showed her to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "Washrooms down the hall," Helen explained. "I'll bring up some hot water and something for those bruises. Supper's at 6, but I can bring a tray up if you'd prefer to rest." "I couldn't," Hannah began. "You can and you will," Helen interrupted firmly. "My brother Samuel doesn't bring strays to my doorstep unless they're in genuine need. Whatever trouble you're in, you're safe here for now." For the first time since leaving the homestead that morning, Hannah felt something like hope stirring in her chest. She sank onto the narrow bed, her body finally acknowledging its exhaustion. She would rest, she decided, just for today. Tomorrow she would take the eastbound stage and figure out what came next. But Vernon Turner had other plans. The pounding on the boarding house door came just after sunset. Hannah, who had been dozing fitfully, jerked awake at the sound of her husband's voice bellowing from the street. "I know she's in there. Hannah Turner, you get your worthless hide out here now." Terror flooded her veins. How had he found her so quickly? She scrambled from the bed, wild-eyed, looking for an escape route. The window was too small, the drop too far. Footsteps approached her door, and Hannah pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. But it was Helen who entered, her expression grim. "Your husband, I take it?" she asked quietly. Hannah nodded, unable to speak through her fear. "He's drunk and making a scene. Sheriff Larson's been called, but he's out at the Wilson place dealing with cattle rustlers." Helen's eyes narrowed with determination. "Samuel's downstairs. He won't let that man up here, but you should know your husband's telling everyone you're touched in the head. Says you had some kind of fit and ran off, that he's been searching for you all day, worried sick." Of course he would say that. Vernon had always been careful to present himself as the concerned, patient husband to the outside world. It was his word against hers, and in Wheatland, Vernon Turner's word carried the weight of 3 years' residence and many shared whiskeys with the town's men. "I have to leave," Hannah whispered. "If he finds me, you're not going anywhere tonight," Helen said firmly. "That man's waiting in the street. Samuel will handle him." Before Hannah could protest, the sounds of a scuffle erupted from below. A crash, shouts, the splintering of wood. Hannah rushed to the window in time to see Samuel Archer drive his fist into Vernon's jaw, sending him sprawling in the dusty street. "You stay away from this establishment, Turner." Samuel's voice carried clearly in the evening air. "The lady doesn't want to see you, and that's her right." Vernon staggered to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. "She's my wife, I got rights." "Not to beat her half to death, you don't," Samuel replied coldly. A small crowd had gathered, watching the confrontation with avid interest. "She fell," Vernon insisted, looking around at the onlookers. "Always been clumsy, and her mind ain't right. Doc Simmons can tell you, I saw what I saw," Samuel cut him off. "Now get on your horse and ride home, Turner. Sleep it off." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "This ain't over, Archer. That's my property you're harboring." "She's a person, not property." Samuel's voice was low but carried to where Hannah stood frozen at the window. "And any man who thinks a woman's worth is in bearing children doesn't deserve to have a wife at all." Hannah's breath caught. How had he known exactly what Vernon held against her? Then she realized it was a common enough story out here, where children meant hands to work the land, where a woman's value was often measured by her fertility. Vernon spat in the dust. "You'll regret getting involved, Archer. Mark my words." He stumbled toward his horse, but turned back with venom in his eyes. "And you, Hannah, if you're listening, you come home by morning or don't come back at all. I'll burn everything you own." With that final threat, he mounted unsteadily and galloped out of town, nearly colliding with a wagon as he went. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with fresh gossip. Hannah sank to the floor beneath the window, trembling uncontrollably. This was worse than she'd imagined. Vernon would be watching the stagecoach office now. He'd tell everyone she was crazy, unbalanced. Who would help a madwoman against her concerned husband? A soft knock at the door preceded Helen's return. "He's gone for now," she said, setting down a tray with tea and bread. "Samuel wants to speak with you if you're willing." Hannah nodded numbly. Minutes later, Samuel entered, a darkening bruise on his cheekbone, the only evidence of the altercation. "I'm sorry," Hannah said immediately. "I've brought trouble to your door." Samuel shook his head. "Turner's been trouble since he arrived in these parts. This isn't the first time he's shown his true nature after drinking." "He'll come back," Hannah said, voicing her greatest fear. "And next time he'll bring others. Men listen to other men in this town." "Some do," Samuel acknowledged, taking a seat on the room's single chair while Hannah perched on the edge of the bed. "But not all. Sheriff Larson's a fair man. Once he hears what happened, it won't matter," Hannah interrupted. "We're married." The law doesn't permit a man to beat his wife," Samuel said firmly. "Whatever Turner believes." Hannah gave a bitter laugh. "Perhaps not in writing, Mr. Archer, but in practice. You know as well as I do that what happens between a man and his wife stays behind closed doors. No one interfered these past 3 years. Why would they start now?" Samuel's expression darkened. 3 years of this." Hannah looked away, ashamed. "It wasn't always this bad. At first it was just his temper, words, then a slap when I burned the bread. It got worse after the first year passed with no baby. And now—" Her hand drifted unconsciously to her abdomen. "The doctor says I likely can't have children. Something wrong with me inside." "There's nothing wrong with you," Samuel said, his voice gentle but firm. "And your worth isn't in bearing children, no matter what that fool of a husband believes." Those words again, the ones he'd thrown at Vernon in the street. Hearing them a second time, directed to her with such conviction, broke something inside Hannah. The tears she'd been holding back for hours, for years, perhaps spilled over. Samuel respectfully averted his eyes, giving her a moment to collect herself. "I have a proposition, Mrs. Turner." Hannah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, instantly wary. "What sort of proposition?" "My ranch is 15 miles north of town. I need a housekeeper, someone to cook, keep the place in order. The work's not easy, but the pay is fair, and you'd have your own cabin. Most importantly, it's far from your husband's property and not a place he'd think to look for you." Hannah stared at him. "You're offering me employment. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Samuel replied simply. "I know you had the courage to leave a dangerous situation. I know you're willing to work since you offered to pay your way. And I know my ranch needs tending while I'm seeing to the cattle." It seemed too convenient, too perfect a solution. Hannah's experiences had taught her to be suspicious of kindness, especially from men. "Why would you help me this way?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady. "My mother was in a similar situation long ago. She didn't get out in time. I was 12 when my father beat her so badly she never woke up." Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago in Missouri," he continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Helen and I came west afterward, built something new. I swore I'd never stand by when I saw the signs again." He hesitated. "I'm not offering out of pity, Mrs. Turner. I genuinely need the help, and you genuinely need somewhere safe to stay until you decide your next steps. What about Vernon?" "He'll come looking eventually. My land is registered in the territorial records. I pay my taxes and keep to myself, but it's also remote with good visibility in all directions. No one approaches without being seen miles off." He stood, moving toward the door. "Think on it tonight. The offer stands either way. If you'd rather take the stage tomorrow, I'll see you safely to it." After he left, Hannah sat in the gathering darkness, weighing her options. The eastbound stage would take her. Where? She had no money for a lengthy journey, no family waiting to receive her, no skills beyond those of a farmer's wife. Samuel Archer's offer provided immediate safety and time to plan. Yet the thought of being isolated on a remote ranch with a man she barely knew carried its own risks. But there was something about Samuel Archer, a steadiness, an integrity that she sensed rather than could explain, that made her inclined to trust him. And his sister clearly adored him, which spoke to his character. By morning, Hannah had made her decision. She would accept the position at Circle Ranch, at least temporarily. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than returning to Vernon or fleeing penniless into the unknown. Samuel arrived shortly after breakfast, bringing a sturdy mare for Hannah to ride. "Her name's Willow," he explained as he helped Hannah mount. "Gentle as they come, but sure-footed in rough country." Helen provided a basket of food for their journey and hugged Hannah fiercely before they departed. "My brother's the best man I know," she whispered. "You'll be safe with him." They left Wheatland by the North Road, Samuel deliberately choosing a route that wouldn't take them near the Turner homestead. Hannah kept looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see Vernon in pursuit, but the road behind them remained empty. As they rode, Samuel pointed out landmarks and told her about the Circle A. "It's not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's good land. I run about 800 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. There's a small orchard near the house that my predecessor planted apples and pears. The house itself is solid. 2 bedrooms, a good kitchen. Your cabin is just behind it, small but weathertight." "How long have you been there?" Hannah asked, curious despite her anxiety. 7 years now. Bought it from an old trapper who was heading to California. Helen came with me at first, but she's got a good business in town now." He glanced at her. "I should mention, there are 2 ranch hands who work for me, brothers, Jake and Emmett Wilson. Good men, been with me 5 years. They bunk in the barn and won't trouble you." Hannah nodded, appreciating the information. It was reassuring to know there would be others around, yet concerning to think there would be more people who might reveal her whereabouts if Vernon came asking. "The Wilsons are loyal," Samuel added, as if reading her thoughts. "And they've got no love for Turner. He tried to claim some of their father's water rights last year, caused quite a dispute." They rode mostly in companionable silence after that, the vast Wyoming landscape rolling out before them. It was beautiful in its harsh way, sagebrush and grass stretching to distant mountains, hawks circling overhead, the occasional antelope bounding away at their approach. By mid-afternoon they crested a hill and Samuel pointed ahead. "There it is, Circle A." Hannah followed his gesture and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a protected valley. A 2-story log house formed the center, with a large barn, several corrals and smaller outbuildings arranged around it. A creek wound through the property, feeding what appeared to be the orchard Samuel had mentioned. Beyond the immediate homestead, cattle grazed on the surrounding grasslands. "It's lovely," Hannah said, meaning it. After 3 years in a 1-room cabin with Vernon, the Circle looked like a small paradise. Samuel smiled, obviously proud of his home. "We'll have you settled before sundown. The hands are out with the herd today. Won't be back until tomorrow." As they approached, Hannah could see more details: the neat fencing, the smoke curling from the house chimney, the healthy apple trees heavy with nearly ripe fruit. It spoke of care, of attention, of a man who took pride in his work. True to his word, Samuel had Hannah settled in the small cabin behind the main house before evening. It was indeed small, just 1 room with a bed, a table and chair, a small stove, and a chest for her belongings. But it was clean, with curtains at the window and a colorful quilt on the bed. "My sister made that when she still lived here," Samuel explained, nodding at the quilt. "Said every home needed something bright." "It's perfect," Hannah said, overwhelmed by the simple luxury of having a space that was solely hers. "I'll show you the main house now, where you'll be working," Samuel continued. "There's stew on the stove for supper. I'm not much of a cook, so your meals will be a welcome improvement." The tour of the main house revealed a well-built, practical home. The downstairs contained a large kitchen with a good stove, a dining area, and a comfortable sitting room with bookshelves that surprised Hannah with their contents, not just practical manuals on ranching and animal husbandry, but poetry, history, even novels. "You read Dickens?" she asked, running her finger along the spine of Great Expectations. Samuel looked almost embarrassed. "Winter evenings are long out here. Reading passes the time." Hannah smiled, recalling how Vernon had mocked her few books, eventually using several for kindling during a cold snap. She'd mourned those lost pages more than many other things he'd destroyed. Upstairs were 2 bedroom Samuels and a spare room and a small study. Everything was plain but well made, practical without being austere. It felt like a home rather than just a house. "Your duties would be cooking, cleaning, mending as needed," Samuel explained as they returned to the kitchen. "The house has been without a woman's touch since Helen left. I do what I can, but between the cattle and the other ranch work." "I understand," Hannah assured him. "I'm used to managing a household." They ate supper at the kitchen table, the savory stew warming Hannah after the long ride. Samuel was respectful, maintaining a proper distance while being hospitable. He explained more about the ranch's routines when the hands took meals, the usual schedule of chores, where to find supplies she might need. "I'll pay you $15 a month," he said as they finished eating. "More if you take on additional responsibilities as you settle in. You'll have Sundays to yourself and one other day of your choosing each week." It was more than fair generous, even. Hannah had never had her own money under Vernon's roof. The thought of earning a wage, of having independence, was both thrilling and terrifying. "What about Vernon?" she asked, voicing the fear that had lingered all day. "If he discovers I'm here, he won't," Samuel assured her. "And if by some chance he does, he'll find me and the Wilson boys ready to greet him. You're under my protection now, Mrs. Turner. I give you my word on that. Protection." The concept was almost foreign after years of living in fear. Hannah didn't know if she could truly believe in it, but she was willing to try. "Thank you, Mr. Archer," she said simply. "For everything," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to start your duties." That night in her small cabin, Hannah slept more soundly than she had in years, lulled by the knowledge that for the first time in a very long time, no angry fists would wake her. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to Hannah's new life at Circle Ranch. She rose early to prepare breakfast for Samuel and the Wilson brothers, spent her days cleaning and organizing the long-neglected house, and found unexpected pleasure in cooking meals that were received with genuine appreciation rather than criticism. Jake and Emmett Wilson proved to be exactly as Samuel had described them, good men who treated her with respectful courtesy. They were hard-working ranch hands in their 30s who clearly admired their boss and were unfailingly polite to Hannah, always removing their hats in her presence and thanking her for the meals she prepared. Samuel himself was often gone from sunrise to sunset, tending to his cattle, fixing fences, or handling the myriad tasks required to keep the ranch running. But he always returned for the evening meal, sometimes bringing wildflowers he'd picked along the way, claiming offhandedly that the table needed brightening. As September gave way to October, Hannah began to relax slightly, to believe that perhaps Vernon had decided she wasn't worth the trouble of finding. No one had come looking for her, and the isolation of the ranch, which had initially made her nervous, now felt like a protective barrier between her and her past. One evening, as the first frost painted the grass silver, Hannah was kneading bread dough when Samuel entered the kitchen, his expression troubled. "I was in town today," he said without preamble. "Heard some news you should know." Hannah's hands stilled in the dough. "Vernon." Samuel nodded grimly. "He's been asking after you. Told Sheriff Larson you stole money from him before you left. The sheriff doesn't believe it. He's seen Turner's temper firsthand, but he did ask if I knew your whereabouts." Fear clutched at Hannah's throat. "What did you tell him?" "That I helped a lady in distress reach the stagecoach office some weeks back, and hadn't seen her since." Samuel's steady gaze met hers. "I don't like lying, but in this case, it seemed the lesser evil." Hannah resumed kneading the physical activity to control her rising panic. "Vernon won't give up. He considers me his property. It's not even about wanting me back, it's about not letting me escape him." Samuel leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "There might be a more permanent solution if you're willing to consider it." "What solution?" Hannah asked warily. "Divorce." The word hung in the air between them. Divorce was rare, difficult to obtain, and often left women destitute and socially outcast. Yet the thought of being legally free from Vernon sent a thrill of possibility through Hannah. "Is that even possible?" she asked. "Don't I need to prove things?" "Wyoming territory has more progressive laws than most places," Samuel explained. "Cruelty is grounds for divorce here. And with those marks he left on you, plus witnesses to his behavior in town that night." He paused. "It won't be easy. You'd have to go before a judge, testify. But it could be done." Hannah set the bread dough aside to rise and wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron. "Vernon would fight it. He'd tell everyone I'm unstable, that I imagined the abuse." "Let him try." Samuel's voice hardened. "There are more people willing to stand with you than you might think. Helen, for one. Doc Simmons, too. He's treated enough of Turner's handiwork to know the truth." The possibility of freedom, real, legal freedom, was intoxicating. Yet Hannah hesitated. "Even if I obtained a divorce, where would I go?" "What would I do? You could stay here," Samuel said quietly. "As my housekeeper for as long as you wish. You've brought order and comfort to this place in just a few weeks. The men are better fed than they've been in years. And he stopped, seeming to search for words. "I've enjoyed having someone to talk with in the evenings." Hannah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. She'd enjoyed those evening conversations, 2 discussions about books, about the ranch, about life beyond Wyoming. Samuel Archer was unlike any man she'd ever known, thoughtful, intelligent, and unfailingly respectful of her opinions. "I'll think about it," she promised. And she did, through the night and into the following days, weighing the risks against the promise of freedom. Her decision came unexpectedly, catalyzed by a letter that arrived with the monthly supply wagon from town. It was from Helen, warning that Vernon had been drinking heavily and making more pointed threats about finding his runaway wife. The final lines chilled Hannah to the bone. "He's been asking specifically about my brother's ranch. Be careful, dear Hannah. That man has murder in his eyes." That evening, as she and Samuel sat by the fire after supper, Hannah broached the subject. "I want to file for divorce," she said firmly. "As soon as possible." Samuel looked up from the book he'd been reading. "You're certain?" "Yes." She handed him Helen's letter. "Vernon's getting closer. I need to do this now while I still can." Samuel read the letter, his expression darkening. "I'll take you to town tomorrow. Judge Parker is hearing cases this week." "What will I need to say?" Hannah asked, fear and determination warring within her. The truth, Samuel said simply. Just the truth, Hannah. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it with such care, such gentle respect, brought tears to her eyes. The journey to Wheatland the next day was tense, both of them watchful for any sign of Vernon on the road. They reached town without incident and went directly to the courthouse, a simple wooden building on the main street. Judge Harold Parker was a stern-faced man with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened gravely as Hannah, her voice sometimes faltering but never stopping, recounted 3 years of escalating abuse, culminating in the beating that had driven her to flee. "And where have you been residing since leaving your husband's home, Mrs. Turner?" the judge asked. Hannah glanced at Samuel, who gave her an encouraging nod. "At Circle A Ranch, Your Honor, as Mr. Archer's housekeeper." The judge's bushy eyebrows rose slightly, but he made no comment on the arrangement. "Your husband has made inquiries about you, claims you're not in your right mind." "I am perfectly sane, Your Honor," Hannah replied, straightening her shoulders. "I simply refuse to stay and be beaten to death." Judge Parker shuffled some papers on his desk. "Ordinarily, I'd require notice be given to your husband of these proceedings. However, given the nature of your allegations and the evident danger to your person—" He paused, studying her face where the last faint traces of bruises could still be seen. "I'll issue a temporary order of protection and set a hearing date for 2 weeks hence. Mr. Turner will be notified and given the opportunity to contest the divorce at that time." Hannah's heart sank. 2 weeks. 2 weeks for Vernon to prepare his lies, to rally supporters, to find her. "In the meantime, Mrs. Turner, you are legally separated from your husband," the judge continued. "He is ordered to stay at least 100 yards from your person at all times. Should he violate this order, he will be subject to arrest." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As they left the courthouse, Hannah felt lighter despite the challenges ahead. For the first time, the law had acknowledged her right not to be beaten. Samuel was quiet as they mounted their horses for the return journey. "You did well in there," he finally said as they left town behind. "Took courage to tell your story that way." "I was terrified," Hannah admitted, "but also relieved to say it out loud after hiding it for so long." They rode in companionable silence for several miles, each lost in thought. The day was clear and cool, the aspens in the distance beginning to turn golden with autumn's approach. "Samuel," Hannah said suddenly, using his given name for the first time. "What will happen after, if I get the divorce?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "That depends on what you want, Hannah. The position at Circle A remains yours for as long as you wish. But if you decide to go elsewhere, start fresh where no one knows your history, I'd understand. Help you get there, even." The thought of leaving Circle A, of leaving Samuel, created an unexpected ache in Hannah's chest. When had this place, this man, come to mean so much to her? "I'd like to stay," she said softly. "At least for now." Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, relief perhaps, or something warmer. "I'm glad to hear it," he replied simply. They were halfway back to the ranch when they spotted the rider approaching from the east. Samuel reined in his horse, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his hand moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. But as the rider drew closer, Hannah recognized the horse first copper, Samuel's gelding that his sister sometimes used, and then Helen herself, riding hard toward them. "Samuel, Hannah," she called as she reached them, her face flushed with exertion. "Thank God I found you on the road." "Turner's gone mad. He came to the boarding house this morning, tore through every room looking for Hannah. When he couldn't find her, he started shouting that he knew she was at Circle A, that she'd spread her legs for that Archer bastard and he'd kill you both. Samuel's expression hardened. Did he hurt you? No, Sheriff Larson arrived before he could do more than frighten my boarders. But Samuel, he's riding for your ranch now with at least 3 men. They were drinking at Barker's before they set out. Hannah felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her. Vernon was on his way to circle a armed drunk, and with companions equally eager for violence. Jake and Emmett would be working the north pasture today, too far to offer any defense. We need to turn back to town, Helen urged. Get the sheriff to send men, no time, Samuel cut in grimly. If they left before you, they've got at least an hour's head start. They could already be at the ranch. He turned to Hannah, his eyes serious. This is your choice. We can ride for town, get help, or we can try to reach the ranch first, warn the hands, prepare a defense. Hannah didn't hesitate. The ranch. I won't hide in town while Vernon destroys your home because of me. Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. We'll take the Ridge Trail. It's rougher but faster than the main road. They left Helen with instructions to send Sheriff Larson after them, then set off at a gallop for Circle A, pushing their horses as fast as the terrain allowed. The Ridge Trail was indeed rough, a narrow path that climbed steeply before running along a rocky outcropping that overlooked the valley. But it provided a direct route to the ranch and, crucially, a vantage point to see what awaited them. As they neared the ridge's highest point, Samuel slowed their pace, approaching cautiously. They dismounted and crawled the final yards to peer down at Circle A below. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. 4 riders were approaching the main house, Vernon unmistakable in the lead. Even from this distance, Hannah could see the rifles they carried. They haven't reached the house yet, Samuel observed. We might get there first if we hurry. They remounted and urged their horses down the steep trail that led from the ridge to the ranch, galloping the final stretch across open pasture. They reached the back of the property just as Vernon and his companions approached the front. Samuel helped Hannah dismount and led her quickly to the barn. Stay here, he instructed, retrieving his rifle and checking that it was loaded. Lock yourself in the tack room if they come inside. Samuel, no, Hannah began, but he cut her off. I won't let him hurt you again, he said, his voice low and fierce. Not while I draw breath. Before she could protest further, he was gone, moving swiftly toward the house to confront the intruders. Hannah stood frozen in the barn doorway, torn between hiding as instructed and following Samuel. She could hear Vernon's voice now, slurred with drink but still chillingly familiar. Archer, get out here, you thieving bastard, bring my wife. Hannah couldn't see the confrontation from her position, but she heard Samuel's reply, steady and controlled. Turner. You're trespassing on private property. Turn around and leave. Vernon's laugh was ugly. Not without what's mine. Hannah, I know you're here, you worthless slut. Show yourself. The lady isn't coming with you, Turner. Samuel's voice remained calm. She's filed for divorce and has a protection order. You're violating it by being here. A moment of silence, then Vernon's voice again, incredulous. Divorce? That's a damn lie. No judge would. Judge Parker issued the order this morning, Samuel interrupted. It's legal and binding. Now get off my land before I'm forced to defend it. The sound of a shotgun being cocked punctuated his words. Hannah couldn't stay hidden, not with Samuel facing 4 armed men alone. Moving as quietly as possible, she circled around the barn until she could see the confrontation, Samuel standing on the porch, shotgun in hand, facing Vernon and 3 other men on horseback in the yard. She recognized 2 of Vernon's companions as his regular drinking partners from town. The third was his brother Elias, a man as mean-spirited as Vernon but with a cooler head. You've got no right to interfere between man and wife, Archer, Elias called out. Whatever lies Hannah's been telling, she belongs at home. Hannah Turner is under my protection, Samuel replied evenly. And she doesn't belong to anyone but herself. Vernon's face contorted with rage. You've been betting her, haven't you, taking what's mine? That's not true, Hannah said clearly, stepping into view. All heads turned toward her. Mr. Archer has been a gentleman and a friend, nothing more. Hannah, Samuel's voice held warning, but she ignored it, moving to stand beside him on the porch. I'm not going back with you, Vernon, she said, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. Not now, not ever. The law has recognized your cruelty. It's over. Vernon dismounted, swaying slightly from the whiskey but his eyes burning with malice. It's over when I say it's over. You think any judge will believe a barren woman over me? You're nothing, Hannah. Nothing but damaged goods no other man would want. That's enough, Samuel's voice cut like a whip. Get back on your horse and leave, or so help me, I'll put a load of buckshot in you where you stand. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Elias Turner broke the silence, his tone conciliatory but his eyes cold. Let's be reasonable here. We're all neighbors. Surely we can settle this without bloodshed. There's nothing to settle, Hannah replied. I've made my decision. Vernon took a menacing step forward and Samuel raised the shotgun to his shoulder. Not one step closer, Turner. Vernon stopped, but his hand moved to the pistol at his hip. You willing to die for another man's leavings, Archer? Everything happened so quickly after that. Vernon drew his pistol. Samuel fired the shotgun, and Elias Turner raised his rifle. Hannah saw the flash from Elias's gun, heard Samuel grunt in pain beside her, felt him stagger against her. Then more shots, Vernon falling, clutching his shoulder where Samuel's buckshot had struck him, the other men scattering for cover. And from the ridge behind them, another shot, then another. Jake and Emmett Wilson had heard the commotion and returned, firing down at the intruders from higher ground. Samuel, Hannah cried as he slumped to the porch floor, blood spreading across his shirt from a wound in his side. Samuel, stay with me. His eyes found hers, pain-filled but alert. Are you hit? No, but you are, she said, pressing her hands against the wound to stem the bleeding. We need to get you inside. With strength born of desperation, Hannah helped Samuel into the house as bullets splintered the wood around them. Once inside, she bolted the door and lowered him gently onto the sofa. The Wilsons will drive them off, Samuel said through gritted teeth. Jake's the best shot in the county. Hannah was barely listening, focused on examining his wound. The bullet had entered his side below the ribs. It didn't appear to have hit any vital organs, but the bleeding was steady and concerning. I need to remove the bullet, she said, her mind suddenly clear despite the chaos outside. And stop the bleeding. Samuel managed a weak smile. Knew you were a capable woman the first time I saw you. Save your strength, Hannah instructed, gathering supplies, clean cloths, whiskey from the cabinet, a knife she heated in the fire. This will hurt. I trust you, Samuel said simply, and those 3 words gave Hannah courage she didn't know she possessed. Outside, the gunfire continued, but it was moving away from the house now, the Wilsons driving Vernon and his men back. Hannah blocked it out, concentrating solely on the task before her. With steady hands, she cut away Samuel's shirt, cleaned the wound with whiskey, and probed gently for the bullet. Samuel remained conscious throughout, his jaw clenched against the pain but his eyes never leaving her face. There, she murmured as she felt the bullet, lodged against a rib. Using the knife, she carefully extracted it, then pressed a clean cloth firmly against the wound to stop the fresh bleeding. You should have been a doctor, Samuel said weakly as she bandaged his side. I just don't want to lose you, Hannah replied without thinking, then flushed as she realized what she'd revealed. Samuel's hand found hers, his fingers squeezing gently. You won't lose me. Takes more than Turner's brother to bring me down. The shooting outside had stopped. Moments later, they heard Jake Wilson's voice calling from the yard. "Mr. Archer, Miss Hannah, you folks all right in there?" Hannah moved to the window, keeping low. She saw Jake and Emmett in the yard, rifles ready, but no sign of Vernon or his companions. "Samuel's been shot," she called back. "Is it safe to open the door?" "They're gone, miss," Emmett confirmed. "Vernon took a load of buckshot in the shoulder and we winged his brother. They've high-tailed it back toward town." Hannah unbolted the door, letting the Wilson brothers inside. They rushed to Samuel's side, concern etched on their weathered faces. "Boss, you all right?" Jake asked anxiously. "Thanks to Hannah," Samuel replied. "She dug the bullet out." The brothers exchanged a look of respect. "That's more doctoring than either of us could manage," Emmett admitted. "What do you need us to do now, miss?" "One of you should ride for the doctor," Hannah decided. "The bleeding stopped, but there's risk of fever." "I'll go," Jake volunteered. "Emmett can stay here in case those bastards come back." As Jake rode for town, Hannah and Emmett made Samuel as comfortable as possible, moving him carefully to his bed upstairs. Hannah prepared a poultice of herbs she'd gathered that summer, applying it to the wound to draw out infection. "You're full of surprises, Hannah Turner," Samuel murmured as she worked. The pain and blood loss had left him weak, but his eyes remained clear. "Where did you learn such skills?" "My grandmother was a healer of sorts," Hannah explained, adjusting the pillows behind him. "She taught me which plants help with what ailments. Vernon called it superstitious nonsense, but he was wrong about many things," Samuel finished for her. His hand found hers again, holding it against his chest. "Thank you for saving my life." Hannah felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "You saved mine first, in more ways than one." They fell silent, the simple touch of their joined hands saying more than words could express. Emmett tactfully excused himself to keep watch outside, leaving them alone. "I meant what I said before," Samuel said after a while, his voice low. "Your worth isn't in bearing children. It's in your courage, your kindness, your strength. The man who couldn't see that didn't deserve you." Hannah's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The tears she'd held back for so long spilled over, not from sadness but from the profound relief of being truly seen, truly valued, for the first time in her adult life. "I've come to care for you, Hannah," Samuel continued, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "More than I should, perhaps, given your situation, but I wanted you to know in case—" "Don't," Hannah interrupted fiercely. "Don't talk as if you might die. You won't. I won't allow it." A smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam." Hannah leaned forward impulsively and pressed her lips to his forehead. "Rest now. The doctor will be here soon." Samuel obeyed, his eyes drifting closed, his hand still holding hers as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and hope. Doc Simmons arrived that evening, examined Samuel's wound, and pronounced Hannah's treatment better than most trained physicians would manage. The bullet had indeed missed vital organs, and with proper care, Samuel would make a full recovery. While Samuel rested, Hannah learned from Jake that Vernon and his brother had returned to town, where Sheriff Larson had promptly arrested them for trespassing and attempted murder. Helen had rallied several townswomen to speak out about Vernon's character, sharing stories they'd witnessed or suspected over the years. "Seems like once one lady spoke up, others found their courage too," Jake reported. "Sheriff says Turner's facing serious charges this time." "No one's buying his story that you ran off with the boss." Relief washed over Hannah. For the first time, she dared to believe she might truly be free of Vernon's shadow. As October turned to November, Samuel regained his strength. though Hannah insisted he continue resting more than he thought necessary. Their evenings were spent by the fire, talking for hours about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their dreams, books they'd read, places they hoped to see someday. In those conversations, something shifted between them, friendship deepening into a connection that Hannah had never experienced before, not even during the hopeful early days of her courtship with Vernon. With Samuel, she felt seen and heard, her opinions valued, her thoughts respected. And when he looked at her, those long, thoughtful glances, when he thought she wasn't aware, Hannah felt beautiful again, in a way that had nothing to do with the fading bruises or the gradually softening lines of worry around her eyes. On a crisp November morning, Judge Parker arrived at Circle A, accompanied by Sheriff Larson. Hannah received them in the parlor, her heart racing with apprehension. "Mrs. Turner," the judge began formally, "I've reviewed the evidence in your petition for divorce, including the recent violent actions of your husband. In light of these circumstances and Mr. Turner's current incarceration for attempted murder, I've made my decision without requiring a formal hearing." He handed Hannah a document bearing the territorial seal. "Your divorce is granted, effective immediately. You are legally free of all marital obligations to Vernon Turner." Hannah stared at the paper in her hands, scarcely able to believe it was real. "Thank you, Your Honor," she managed to say. "Turner will be transported to Cheyenne for trial next week," Sheriff Larson added. "Between the shooting here and the testimony of several women in town about his violent nature, he's facing at least 10 years in territorial prison." After they left, Hannah stood in the parlor, the divorce decree clutched to her chest, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't quite name. Freedom, relief, and something else, possibility. Samuel found her there, moving more easily now as his wound healed. "Hannah, are you all right?" She turned to him, tears and laughter mingling. "I'm divorced, free. After all this time, I'm just Hannah again." His smile was warm, his eyes tender. "You were always Hannah, the bravest, strongest woman I've ever known." She crossed the room to him, still holding the decree. "I couldn't have done this without you, Samuel. You gave me safety when I needed it most, a home when I had nowhere to go. You gave me just as much in return," he replied softly. "This house wasn't a home until you arrived." Hannah looked up at him, suddenly certain of what she wanted, what perhaps she'd wanted since those first evenings by the fire, talking of books and dreams. "I'd like to stay," she said. "Not just as your housekeeper." Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. "Hannah, are you certain? After everything you've been through, I wouldn't want to rush you into." She silenced him by rising on tiptoes and pressing her lips gently to his. A chaste kiss, brief but full of promise. When she drew back, his expression was one of wonder. "I've never been more certain of anything," Hannah said. "I know it seems fast, perhaps improper, but life is short and uncertain. I learned that when I watched you bleeding on that porch. And I know now what real love looks like. It's respect and kindness, and seeing someone for who they truly are." Samuel's arms encircled her carefully, mindful of his healing wound. "I fell in love with you that first day by the stream," he admitted. "Your courage, your dignity, even when you were afraid. I tried not to let it show, knowing you needed safety more than romance. And now?" Hannah asked, her heart full. "Now I'd like to court you properly, Hannah Turner, if you'll allow it." His smile was both tender and mischievous. "Though we seem to have things somewhat backward, living under the same roof before our first kiss." Hannah laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to fill the room. "I think we can be forgiven for breaking convention, given the circumstances." Their second kiss was longer, deeper, a promise of all that might come. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I can't offer you children," he said softly. The doctor in Cheyenne told me years ago a childhood illness left me unable to father a child. I should have mentioned it sooner, but it doesn't matter, Hannah interrupted. Your worth isn't in fathering children any more than mine is in bearing them. We are enough, just as we are. Samuel's smile was brilliant with relief and love. We could adopt someday. There are always children in need of homes. I'd like that, Hannah agreed. But for now, I'd just like to be with you. Build something together. Outside the window, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the circle in white. Inside, by the crackling fire, Samuel Archer and Hannah Turner sat close together, planning their future with quiet joy. They were married the following spring, with Helen as Hannah's attendant and the Wilson brothers standing proudly with Samuel. The ceremony was held in the orchard at Circle A, the apple trees in full bloom creating a canopy of fragrant white blossoms above them. Judge Parker himself performed the ceremony, taking particular satisfaction in pronouncing them husband and wife after all they'd overcome. The small gathering of friends, including Doc Simmons, Sheriff Larson and his wife, and several townspeople who had supported Hannah through her divorce, celebrated with a feast that lasted well into the evening. As twilight fell, Samuel led Hannah away from the festivities to the small rise overlooking the ranch, their home, now legally shared between them. "Happy, Mrs. Archer?" he asked, his arm warm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Hannah replied honestly, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "I have everything I could ever want," Samuel said simply. He drew her into a kiss that spoke of promise, of passion, of a future built on mutual respect and love. 2 years later, a wagon arrived at Circle A carrying precious cargo twin girls, just 3 years old, with solemn eyes and tangled dark curls. Their parents had died of fever in a mining camp near Cheyenne, and the territorial authorities had reached out to the Archers, knowing they had expressed interest in adoption. Hannah fell in love with Lily and Rose instantly, and Samuel wasn't far behind, especially when the previously silent girls began to chatter once they realized they were truly home to stay. By 1880, Circle A Ranch had prospered under the Archers' joint management. Hannah had added a vegetable garden and expanded the orchard, even experimenting with berries and herbs that weren't common in Wyoming. Samuel had improved his cattle stock and added sheep, a venture that proved surprisingly profitable. The small cabin where Hannah had first stayed was now converted into a schoolroom, where she taught not only their daughters but also the children of neighboring ranchers who would otherwise have gone without education. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Samuel surprised Hannah with a gift, the deed to Circle A, re-registered in both their names as equal partners. "It was always as much yours as mine," he explained as she protested. "You've put as much work into this land as I have. More some days." That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson, their daughters playing nearby, Hannah marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How different things might have been," she replied, "if I hadn't found the courage to leave that day, if you hadn't been riding by the stream." Samuel squeezed her hand. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." Hannah smiled, watching as Lily and Rose attempted to catch fireflies in the gathering dusk. From the destruction of her first marriage had risen this beautiful, unexpected life, one built on love rather than obligation, on partnership rather than ownership. "You were right, you know," she said softly. "That day in town when you told Vernon my worth wasn't in bearing children." Samuel nodded, his expression serious. "I meant every word." "I know," Hannah replied, "but it took me longer to believe it myself. to understand that I had value beyond what a man might want from me. She gestured to their home, their land, their children. This life we've built, it's so much more than I dared to dream was possible. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Samuel drew her close, his kiss as tender as it had been on their wedding day. "We're just getting started," he promised. "The best is yet to come." And as their daughters ran to them, laughing with the simple joy of childhood, Hannah Archer knew with absolute certainty that he was right.